Hello, this lesson is going to look at how to mark comparison questions. So we're going to look at the comparison question, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes and some of the issues and how we can identify them, and therefore if we can identify them and understand them, then hopefully we'll be able to avoid them. So this is a question that is taken from, I think, the 2018 paper, and it's about the attitudes towards new immigrants in the USA in the early 20th century. So source C says, strong trade union movements in American cities meant that many Americans with left-wing views were seen as helpful allies in the eyes of many. American identity had been created out of a variety of cultures and religions, and so new Catholic immigrants were welcome to the USA. Most Americans thought that new immigrants would find a job and work hard like other immigrant groups had done before. Immigrants settled in many cities throughout America but tended to stay primarily on the East Coast. And source D says, Americans were particularly worried that immigrants would be a drain on the country as they would not find work. They were also unhappy that many of the new immigrants were Catholic, which they saw as a threat to the Protestant nation they had created. Immigrants in the early 1900s tended to come from places in Eastern and Southern Europe, such as Poland and Italy. Excuse me. These areas were also known for their left-wing politics, which scared many Americans who had fear of communist ideas. So you have to compare the views of sources C and D on the attitudes towards new immigrants in the early 20th century. And it says compare the sources overall and or in detail. So this is the answer that I have written. Source C and D disagree on the attitudes towards new immigrants in the USA in the early 20th century. Source C states, strong trade union movements in American cities meant that many immigrants with left-wing views were seen as helpful allies in the eyes of many. Source C disagrees, as it states, these areas were also known for their left-wing politics, which scared many Americans who had a fear of communist ideas. Therefore, sources C and D both mention left-wing politics. Goes on to say, source C states, American identity had been created out of a variety of cultures and religions, so new Catholic immigrants were welcome to the USA, whereas source D states, they were also unhappy that many of the new immigrants were Catholic, which they saw as a threat to the Protestant nation they had created. Therefore, sources C and D disagree about the attitudes towards Catholic immigrants in the USA. So, we have a little look at whether we get the different marks. So the overall comparison, sources C and D disagree on the attitudes towards new immigrants in the USA in the early 20th century. That is correct. The sources do disagree. Use the question and use the word disagree, so you get 1 mark for that. And then the comparison of the quotes, you've got a quote about left-wing views and disagreeing with another quote about left-wing views. So one of them saying that they were seen as helpful allies, another one was saying that Americans were scared. So they are 2 quotes about the same thing and they disagree, so you get a mark for that. Then the developed comparison you don't get because it doesn't summarise how the quote disagree. It doesn't use the word disagree, it just tells us that both of them mention left-wing politics. There's no comparison there, so you'd have to get a comparison there. You'd have to say sources C and D disagree about American attitudes towards left-wing immigrants. Then move on to the next quote comparison. The American identity created a variety of cultures, and Catholic immigrants were welcomed. And source D is about Catholic immigrants being seen as a threat. So both of those quotes they're relevant to each other. They are both appropriate quotes, but you don't get the mark because it doesn't say the word disagree. So we'd have to say source D disagrees rather than source D states. So that is not a mark. Final part, therefore, sources C and D disagree about the attitudes towards Catholic immigrants in the USA. Now that is a mark because it summarises what the quotes disagree about and it uses the word disagree. So overall, that answer gets 3 out of 4. So there's a couple of common mistakes, such as not using the word disagree or not properly comparing the sources, and then some also correct points so that you can kind of understand what is good about them. Hopefully that was helpful, and then you can go on and try the worksheet yourself and see if you can spot the mistakes and kind of identify how to fix them.